All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the stream. I hope everybody is doing well tonight. Tonight, we are picking up where we left off on the stream last time, although we do have a couple of things that were done offline that we'll kind of quickly cover. So, for those of you who are new to the stream, we are basically building a game engine completely from scratch using C and Vulkan as our initial backend. Our initial rendering backend, rather. And so we are currently in the middle of a fairly large refactor effort at the moment, just taking care of a bunch of tech debt that sort of built up since the beginning of the series due to a number of factors. And we're closing the loop on that, and that is kind of where we're picking up tonight. So we actually have the whole application compiling again. We've kind of stitched the code back together, and now we're getting it to the point where we're stepping through the code and trying to get things to run. So that is essentially where we are. I do want to quickly just mention that I have gone ahead and got this compiling on the Windows platform as well. So we are on Linux right now, but as of right now on this recording, the feature reorg branch does compile on Windows. So if you're following along with the series, you can definitely pull those updates and follow along with me here. But yeah, that's basically the updates. So all right, I was official. How's it going? Good to see you. Lol, God, that beard. Yeah, it's coming in nicely. I'm all right with it. I like it. Literally just got into Linux Garuda 2 days ago. Nice. I've heard good things about Garuda. Want to make something like C Matrix or something cool everyone wants to download for fun. Your understanding of the terminal space is commendable, sir. I appreciate that. I'm constantly learning new things about it, but the more I work this way through the terminal, the more I like it. It's just I don't know. It seems a lot less clutter to me. You know, there's a lot less visual clutter. There's a lot less mental overhead in terms of using the applications. Once you get used to it, it sort of becomes muscle memory and switching back and forth. Between the different terminals and whatnot in your multiplexer becomes sort of like second nature. So I'm really liking the setup quite a lot. All right, so before we jump too much into things, I do want to take just a quick second though and thank the supporters of the channel. Beginning with our partners, they are the highest tier of subscription over on YouTube memberships and Patreon. So they are Dustin Punt, Gebby Bashir, and Gerbolis Inc. I would also like to thank all of the other supporters listed here on the screen. They're a combination of the other tiers of support over on Patreon, YouTube memberships, as well as Twitch subscriptions. So thank you all very much for your support. I greatly appreciate it, and it lets a guy know that you guys appreciate the work that I'm doing. So thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. And I hope it goes without saying that I appreciate all of you guys who are following me here over on the Twitch side or the YouTube side. We do simulcast to both. I do pay attention to both chats. Yeah, so this is an interactive stream. So if you guys have any questions, comments, I do read those things and I will answer them to the best of my ability. RCW, good to see you. How's it going? I keep piping the lolcat command to make everything rainbow. Yeah, I did that for a number of days too. I actually aliased it to a bunch of commands at one point in my my bash RC. So I just sort of like anytime I would do like an ls, I'd have ls la, and then I'd pipe that into lolcat. Going well, bit tired, but I'm here. Awesome. Well, yeah, I get that. I'm a bit tired as well, but we're here. We're here to make some progress. So, but yeah, we did make a little bit of progress offline. Like I said, we did get this compiling on Windows as well. So we've got parity, at least as far as those two platforms. Mac, I'm going to tackle probably last, just because I've got a couple of things that I want to set up on that machine, and then my plan for that is when we actually go through the Mac portion, I want to stream from the Mac, but also, have that be what shows up here on the screen. So that's a little bit tricky because of the way I have it set up at the moment, but we'll figure it out. That's my next goal, learning the Bash RC stuff. Oh, there's so much too. Bash terminals make me want to bite my teeth. Yeah, I mean, that's fair, right? But I have to get used to it, and then you've got so many different terminals out there, right? So yeah, there's Bash, there's ZSH as well. And then you have your different terminal emulators, like WesTerm is the one that I've sort of landed on, which is the one I'm using now, and it works really well. Okay, so just to sort of recap here, we are able to build. So we can build everything. It compiles. It does run. So if we bring our debugger up here, this is basically where we left off sort of last time. Let me get rid of this breakpoint. We don't need that guy. So if we let this run, we essentially get to our Vulkan device setup. So what's happening here is we're doing a check on physical device meets requirements. And one of the things that this does is it takes into account the context current window, and then it grabs the surface from that renderer backend state, right? The problem with this is if we follow the stack trace up, this is happening right way before we actually create a window, which is fine. It just means we have to change some things, right? So before, when we stood up our renderer and we stood up our platform layer, which is a little bit further up here, it's actually quite a bit further. Where was it? Platform system is just right here. So before, when we stood up our platform system, we were standing up the window with that, right? Which made sense in the context that we were working in, but now it doesn't make sense as much because we've actually separated the windowing away from the platform somewhat. In that, we can actually support multiple windows. So we made a change to say, well, this is just the startup of the platform layer itself, just to initialize some things in the various platforms. But the actual window creation does not happen until much further down. Let's see, it happens right here, right? So we go through our configuration, we say how many windows do we have, and we set up that number of windows, right? And then this is where we do the platform window create. We pass that on to the renderer so that the renderer knows about it, yada, yada, right? And so this doesn't happen for much, much later, right? And so the consequence of that is now we don't actually have a surface that we need, or a window for that matter, when we go to initialize our renderer. So what's happening here is we're seg faulting because our context does not have a current window, right? It's null pointer. So what we're going to have to do, there's a couple ways we could tackle this. And I've done a little bit of thinking about this offline, but I didn't really want to think about it too much ahead of time because I wanted to sort of tackle this live, right? So there's a couple ways that we could get around this. We could create the window earlier, right? That would solve a lot of problems. That would make this a whole lot easier. And then we could essentially, whenever we create the first window, we could assign that as the active window, and then this problem would essentially go away, right? That would be the easiest solution. But is it the right solution? I don't know, right? So the second way that we could handle this is we could create a dummy window that we don't actually wind up using, but we create it enough to sort of get a surface that we can sort of temporarily use for this purpose, right? So we could set up a dummy window that essentially never gets used and then gets thrown away so that we have this, right? And that might be a little bit weird because I don't know if this is going to be an issue with Direct3D or Metal or not. So it may be something that we're doing specifically for the Vulkan renderer, which might be a little bit weird, right? So that's another thing to consider. And then the third possibility is that we sort of split up the initialization of the renderer backend into two parts. One part that happens before the window creation, and one part that happens after the window creation. And so essentially what that would mean is where we do Vulkan device creation, right? So from here, or I should say from here up, right? We would do when we boot up the system, right? So right now everything's sort of under initialize, and so this is basically creating the instance, right? Going through all the various properties, the extensions, all that kind of stuff. So essentially, we would get the instance, the validation layer set up, and then our logger set up as well. Let's see, and then a few function pointers as well. And then essentially we would halt at that point. And then whenever we create a window, we would then continue on with the boot up of the back end. But that also has its own considerations to take into account. So the consideration there being, if we leave it up to, sort of the application as to when that window gets created, if we try to do anything like loading a texture or loading a shader or anything that requires a Vulkan device, since we haven't set that up yet, we can't do any of that stuff before a window is created, which we technically can't do anyways, right? But that's imposing a rule on the application that the application has to know that has to happen first, right? And so, that might get in the way of some of those things. So those are basically the three ways that we could handle this, in my mind. And I don't really see another way of handling it, unless somebody else can come up with something that I've missed. So we basically just need to kind of pick through those and see where we wind up. The Limbo is 2214, rather. First time chat, welcome. How's it going? Welcome. So Grim Heartless, it's Wes term. Here, I'll pull up the site. Right, and this is not like sponsored or anything. Like, this is not like a paid advertisement or anything. I just really like this terminal emulator, right? So I'll drop this link here in chat for you. That's the terminal emulator we use. I'll drop it over here on the YouTube side as well. So yeah, the thing I like about this one is it's GPU accelerated. It's really fast as a result, and then also it's cross-platform, right? So I'm able to use this on Windows, Mac, and Linux, and I can share the configurations for those outside of the platform-specific stuff. So it's pretty freaking sweet, right? Let's see, over there on YouTube. Hi, how do you manage lifetime of VK image? For example, when you have binded image to descriptor, when you delete it, do you just delay its destruction for a number of frames equal to frames in flight? So that's a good question. So first off, we don't, our image lifecycle is actually separated out from our descriptors, right? So the reason for that is because our material system has what we call a texture map in there, and the texture map is basically what takes an image, right, a Vulkan image or a texture, and connects that with a sampler, right? And that sampler obviously has the descriptor that goes with it. And so the texture map is actually what holds that. So they're completely different life cycles, right? So I could swap out the texture map that's used, or the texture that's pointed to by the texture map. I could swap that out on the fly in a material and not have to modify, the descriptor whatsoever. Of course, except, if I unload one, then that is something I have to deal with. We actually do that all the time in our renderer. So the way that we have it set up is we also have a set of default textures that are loaded actually and created in code. And so it gives us like a blue and white checkerboard pattern for our default texture. And that is actually used while we are loading other textures, right? So if we've got large textures that have to load and stuff, and that takes a little bit of time, those are actually used in the meantime. And because we have that separation of texture map to texture, we are able to separate those things out and say, let's use the temporary texture or the default texture until this other one loads in, and then just swap the pointer and you're good, right? And so we don't really have to worry about that as a result. I hope that makes sense. Lou the Coder, how's it going? About the metal support situation, you mentioned you would prefer to use the C API, so I developed one specifically for my use case. However, do give it a try when you have free time. Okay, I would take a look at that, right? So when I get ready to tackle that, we're probably going to write one here on stream, just to show how you might actually do something like that, right? So one of the goals of this project is to eliminate dependencies wherever I can, right? So I try to do that. I try to avoid library use as much as possible. But if I do, wind up taking a look at that and I use it as a resource, I will certainly credit it, right, where it's due. So that is definitely something that I plan on doing. I might actually wind up doing the metal backend before I do the direct 3D backend, just because right now we're using Molten VK, and that's sort of a translation layer thing, and there's some compatibility issues with that and some issues, underlying issues with that, with what features we can use and whatnot. And so we might get more bang for the buck for actually doing the metal implementation sooner rather than later. Let's see. We need to be aware that this image was used in commands submitted earlier. So this can be an edge case where in the first frame the image is submitted, and in the second it's deleted. I see what you mean. So that's more of an unload scenario. And so, yeah, unloading is really the only situation where that would be a problem. So what I actually do is whenever at least right now we kind of get around it in our scene, whenever I unload a scene, it immediately stops trying to render that scene, right? And the scene actually waits for a couple of frames before it unloads, right? And it basically stops drawing, and then it waits a couple frames, and then it unloads everything. So technically speaking, we're getting around it because of that. We may run into some problems with that when I start streaming assets in and out of memory. But yeah, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But more than likely, it'll be just it'll be something that's completely managed on the Vulkan backend, and the front end won't know about it whatsoever. Let's see. I was surprised after all the online kvetching about how nice the Vulkan API in C actually is. I wrote a renderer, just renders animated models from Doom 3 a few months ago, and the API is honestly nice. It's verbose, though. You got to agree with me on that one, right? And I like most of Vulkan's API. There are some things about it that I really don't like. And one of those things is, having to use render passes and having to use frame buffers is a little bit strange. And where those things are connected is also a little bit strange, in terms of having to use those with shaders and having to also have, let's see, it was shaders and it was because of graphics pipelines. And then what was the other one? I'm trying to remember what the other one was. There was another place. Anyways, it prompted me to use dynamic rendering on desktop and completely get rid of that stuff because it was super annoying. But yes, that's probably one of the more annoying parts, right? But yeah, it's verbose. It gives you a lot of control. like I said, I like most of it, but not all of it. It has its benefits and drawbacks. Trying out the Vulkan scene graph these days. Yeah, I looked at that briefly, but that's about it, right? So I can't really speak on that one, unfortunately. I heard it's decent and a lot of people use it, but yeah, we rolled our own here. Learning C, but it's so boring to read the books. So what I would say about that, in terms of it being boring to read the books, is the way you get around that is build interesting stuff with it, right? Build things that interest you using language, and you'll naturally get better at it. Um, you're thinking about getting physical books instead? I would recommend that. Yep, I have them. You can probably see on my shelf behind me, I've got a whole bunch of books. So, um, yeah, I definitely have invested quite heavily in programming books over the years. Um, you have to read as many books as possible. Yes, but I would also say there's diminishing returns on that too, right? So, what you don't want to do is you don't want to sit there and read and read and read and read and study theory and follow tutorials, or just read tutorials. What you actually have to do to get good at programming and to get good at it as quickly as possible is to jump in and actually write code and actually exercise that, right? If you don't do that, you can read all the theory in the world and it's never going to add up to you, right? Um, so you have to jump in and actually write the code, and get in there and debug and look at the disassembly and understand what your code is actually doing under the hood. Um, that's really the only way that you're really going to become anywhere near proficient with that, for sure. Get your hands dirty, in other words. I don't know if you've discussed it before, but do you think Rust is really the savior? Does it have everything? Does it have everything to be the standard systems programming language? Um, I mean, I'm a firm believer in use the right tool for the right job, right? Um, Rust has a lot of strengths. Um, Personally, I've not used it enough to really develop a full-fledged opinion on it. Other than I don't really like it telling me what to do with my memory, and I realize that's the whole point of Rust. Um, but yeah, I'm not a fan of that, especially from a game development perspective. Like, there are many situations where I need to get in there and manage memory the way that I need it managed versus what the compiler seems to think that I should be doing with it, right? So I think there are a lot of places where it does a lot of good. Wes term here is written in Rust, right? And it's excellent, right? I think it's good for a lot of things. I haven't used it enough though to really speak for or against it though. So I really don't consider myself qualified to answer that fully. Um, we joke about it and stuff here on stream, but like, truthfully speaking, I couldn't speak for or against it, right? I'm sort of neutral on it because I haven't used it enough to really, and by used it enough, I would probably want to use it for a couple of years before coming to an opinion on it, right? And I've not done that. I hope that makes sense. Yeah, Vulkan's verbose, but the little mechanical things about how it works is nice. How the extensible structures work, for example. I agree with you there. Yep. How you can fill everything else with designated initializers. Very consistent API. It is, if nothing else, consistent. I second that physical books are great, but you need experience. Yep. Read one book and then make projects. Yeah, I would agree. Just project after project is the way to do it, right? And don't be afraid to throw away your code and write the thing again, right? Because every time you do that, you're going to get better at it. It's decent, but it only compiles with Clang on my end. Then I tried to add logger named Quill, and it only compiles GCC. Interesting. Okay, that's not great then. Honestly, the hardest thing is coming up with good projects that are motivating to actually build. I think you need extrinsic motivation to finish them, finish the harder, boring bits of projects. So I'll speak on that for a minute because that's literally something I'm dealing with this right now. So one thing that I've found to sort of get you past, situations where you're sort of demotivated, burnt out, tired of looking at it, etc., is to try and set yourself up in a situation where you can have a visual update every so often, because visual updates go a long way in terms of motivation. When you can actually see the changes that you're making come to fruition, that is a big deal, right? And for those of you who have been following here, we've been in this refactor effort for weeks now, just because it's a huge refactor, right? And there's been no visual update. And so it's been kind of hard for me to keep motivated, right? I'm stubborn, so that's helping, right? Right. But yeah, it's, I've definitely talked with some folks offline about this as well. And yeah, maintaining that motivation takes a lot of work, for sure. It's not necessarily always easy. And so when you're starting off, start off with something small, and I do mean really small, and make lots of small things. Don't start writing a game engine to learn a language, right? That's something crazy that I would do. And in that case, don't do what I do. Is what I would say there. Struggle is real. Yeah, Spiro knows. Which, Spiro, why are you not a mod? Spiro should be a mod. For those of you who don't know who Spiro is, he is a GigaChad developer here on Twitch. And I'm going to give him a shout out because he's an awesome dude. And a very out-of-the-box thinker. And if I can type the raid, or the shout out correctly. Come on. There it goes. Because you know better. Yeah. Yeah, I know, right? I might regret that. No, in all seriousness, Spiro is doing some pretty cool stuff. Right now he's got a project where he's got a game that runs using Zig as his game engine, and then that's combined with WASM, and then he's using the HTML DOM as his renderer. That's right, the DOM, not WebGL, not any of that other fancy stuff. He's rendering using the DOM. And it's an interactive thing where it's powered by Twitch commands, right? So it's powered by Twitch chat. So it's super outside of the box, really cool stuff. Highly recommend you follow him if you're not already. Yeah. Yes, he also turned GPU acceleration off because he's insane, which is probably the reason he and I get along, because we're both crazy like that. Advent of code challenges using language you want to learn or no? I can't speak on Advent of code because I've never done it. So I know nothing of it. I've usually kept myself too busy with projects like this one. I'm not sure if anybody here in the chat has any experience with Advent of code. I've not ever used it. Thank you for the follow, by the way, and welcome, OXA Cook. All right. And I see that there's more questions over here on the YouTube side. So I just want to really quickly, because we're about to run into an ad break. So one thing that we do on this stream is we pause the stream whenever ads come up on the Twitch side, which is once every 30 minutes for up to 90 seconds, depending on region and locale. So what I like to do is, since this is a programming stream, I know we haven't done a whole heck of a lot tonight, but we're going to change that. But since this is a programming stream, obviously if there's a full screen ad that's covering up the code and you can't hear what I'm saying, that's kind of useless, right? So I do like to pause the stream for the duration of those ads so that nobody misses anything across the board, right? Keep the playing field even, as it were. So let's see. Let me see if I can knock out another question before that kicks in. Let's see, where were we? Your knowledge on building Kohi, is it based on past experiences or are you learning every day as you go every day off stream, or is everything coming naturally to you as you code on stream? It is a combination, heavily weighed on past experiences, right? So there were a couple things about this that are new that I'm learning, because I wanted this to be a bit of a educational series, but also a learning experience, not only for me, but for you guys too. And we want to try different things on here, right? And so I've built many game engines in the past. I built them professionally for a few years. And so I do have experience doing that. I do have experience working in very large code bases. So none of that stuff scares me, right? So from that perspective, it's ads. Speaking of ads. And I will answer the rest of that question as soon as ads are over, which is in about a minute and 10 seconds, give or take. I'm going to hydrate in the meantime. So we got about 40 seconds left on ads, and then we will continue. Almost done with ads. Just a few more seconds. All right, and ads are dead. So, to finish off the answer to that question, is kohi based on past experience, or am I learning as I go? So most of it is based off of past experience, right? I've built a lot of game engines, but they were all built around OpenGL or WebGL, and I built a couple that were based on DirectX. But older versions of DirectX, like DirectX 9. And so when I started this project, I had written a couple of very, very, very basic renderers in Vulkan. And when I say basic, I mean super basic to the point where like it was a Phong shading model with like a single model that was rotating in the center, like you see on all these tutorials that are out there, right? With like maybe one or two point lights in the scene, and that was about it. There was no scene graph, there was no any of that stuff, right? And so I hadn't written a full-fledged like game engine style Vulkan renderer before I started this series, but I had done that using OpenGL in the past and WebGL. And so I was able to take a lot of that knowledge and just sort of combine it with what I knew of Vulkan to get Vulkan to work the way that I wanted it to. And we're still, tinkering around and trying some different things. Some decisions that I made earlier on were good, some weren't so good, and we're kind of tackling those as we come across them. Refactoring things, that's kind of what this whole refactor effort is about, right? And so, the answer there is definitely mixed. I am learning a lot through this as well, but, a lot of it is based off of experience. So I hope that answers that in a long-winded way. Just the pain of getting through it, complete noob. I mean, hey, listen, like, all of us are noobs at some point, right? So don't worry about it. Don't know how to learn by book? That's okay too. Not everybody can. Never worked for me. Started using C seriously when ChatGPT came out. So I will warn you with ChatGPT. It gives you a lot of wrong advice a lot. So don't become reliant on it, right? I would get away from that as soon as you can, because there's a lot of false information on there, right? And the problem is it presents it as if it's an authority, but it's really not, right? It's scraped off of various things on the internet, and it's all based on weights and averages, and not actual critical thinking of how this stuff actually works. So I would caution you from using that too much. But yeah, I would say if reading books doesn't work, that's fine. But you are going to have to learn how to read specs on different things. Like the Vulkan spec is notoriously long. So is the OpenGL spec for that matter. But you are going to have to learn how to read language specs and things like that at some point to further your knowledge once you get past the basics of it, right? But you don't have to start off doing that. Agree on small, ASAP, try to finish something, and by finish, I mean all the little polish things. Make sure that it builds on other people's computers, write a README, etc. Yes, that's excellent advice. If you're going to write a tic-tac-toe game, make that thing cross-platform, right? Write up a full README on what needs to happen to, pull that down onto somebody's machine and actually get it running, right? And how you developed it and put some screenshots in there and document it, right? It's all good practice. Let's see. Hey, love your streams. Can't watch all of them nor finish them, but I love what you're doing, building my own programming language, and I would love to spread it to people interested. Awesome. That sounds cool. That sounds really neat, Leo. I've wanted to make my own language for a while. It's just, if I did that, I wouldn't be getting anywhere in my game engine, so I can't do that. But it is something I want to bite off at some point. Is it trained on things like forum and Reddit comments? So it's about as reliable as they are? I would think of it that way, yeah. I would not consider it a reliable resource for programming of any kind. Remember to read the man pages for C. Every standard library function, every system call, every config file, every command has a man page. Yes. If you're on Linux and Windows or Linux and Mac OS, that's very easy to do right from the terminal. If you're on Windows, it's a little bit different. But yes. All right. Let's see. Have you given your opinion on the clean code drama? I think we touched on it once, maybe twice. My perspective on that is mixed, right? So in terms of clean code, a lot of times it tends to be the enemy of performance. And Casey Muratori has done a lot of speaking on this, right? And he brings up some really good points. Some of his examples are super focused ones, right? But they make the point nonetheless. The problem that I have with so-called clean code is the same problem that I have with object-oriented programming, in that it tends to add more code, more overhead, more noise to what actual problem you're trying to solve. A lot of times you're better off just looking at the data and thinking about the data that you're dealing with, and what you need to do with that data, and stop trying to break it down into like real world objects, because that doesn't always necessarily make sense, right? And the whole clean code thing, like, my perspective on that is your code can be the cleanest code ever written, and if it doesn't work, if it doesn't do what it's supposed to do, it's useless. So to me, clean code is not that important. Asterisk, though. So a big caveat to that is when you are working in large corporate scenarios, right, where you're working on a code base that 100 other people are touching, then it might become a little bit more important, because a lot of those people understand those practices, and that's how they think about it, and that's how they've been trained to think about it. Universities, they all tend to train, in these clean code, object-oriented, focused manner, right? So, like, if you're working on a project that's got a lot of other people on it, that may make it a little bit more sense to go in that direction with some of that stuff. If you're working on something that's not necessarily performance critical, asterisk again, because I think everything should be treated as performance critical, but anyways, Maybe in some of those cases it makes a little bit more sense, right? But like, bottom line, clean code that doesn't work is useless. So, there's lots of examples out there of games, for example, that were coded atrociously, right, in terms of clean code standards, but yet they work and they were highly successful. So, having clean code doesn't guarantee that your product's going to be successful. Having performant code doesn't guarantee that either, right? But like, where do you want to spend your time? Do you want to spend your time making your code clean, or do you want to spend your time adding features and shipping things, right? It's a big what's the word I'm looking for? It's a trade-off, just like any other thing in programming, right? It's a trade-off. So that's, I guess, kind of where I stand on that. Zed Hayes, how's it going? First time chat, welcome. LLMs are about the worst thing you can use if you don't know what you're doing already. Yes, for the reasons I mentioned before, because they could just give you false information with the authority as if they know what they're talking about, right? If on Windows you use WSL, yeah, that's true. A lot of practices around clean code are active obfuscation. Yes, agreed. And that's one of the things that makes it so dangerous, in my opinion. To be honest, I feel it's a lot easier to get into Linux more than every... Wait. I feel it's easier to get into Linux more than every... with AI so abundant... Oh, more than ever with AI so abundant. Okay. No joke, Copilot and Chat GPT solves 98% of me and my friends' code problems. Then your code problems probably aren't all that advanced, right? When you start having, like if you're talking about writing an efficient Vulkan renderer, Chat GPT is not going to solve that for you, right? So, it might be good at solving like, hey, write me a linked list, right? But I think I even tried that example and it was like full of memory leaks, right? So take it for what it is, right? But analyze every single line that thing outputs, because there's probably going to be issues with it. Even if it compiles, even if it works, analyze it for things like that, right? Maybe it's not performant, or maybe it's got memory leaks or something along those lines, right? I have never gotten code out of ChatGPT that I could actually use, point blank, or that I actually would use in production code. Taman, good to see you. How's it going? I am doing well. It's great to see you. Is there an objective standard to clean? Wait. Is there an objective standard of clean, though, or close to it? Like a named actual common look. So, how do I put this? So, clean code means something different to everybody, right? Now, you have the Uncle Bob version of clean code, right, where he has his own style of things that he purports are the best practices, which best practices, don't get me started on that, right? But everybody, it's a bit like agile development, right? Everybody has their own version of it, right? Nobody follows like a central standard, right? Even agile programming itself doesn't really have like a standard, right? It's like a standard within a standard, or like somebody's version of that standard, right? And it's always different. So like it's very subjective. And yeah, I don't, I have just as much use for clean code as I do agile. And I think agile's a waste of time. So take that for what you will. Copilot is great for boilerplate code, but that's about it. I don't trust it for anything else. Yeah, exactly. Like if you're trying to get your mind wrapped around how you might want to tackle something, then maybe it's okay, but I wouldn't trust it for anything more than that. Some people of high credibility have been pitching this idea of clean code so much. Now I think it's essential. Do you think you can suggest a book or a software engineering resource that might replace clean code in a curriculum? So no. I think there is... I think the replacement for clean code is not listening to what somebody else thinks is good clean code, but trying to understand what the ideas are behind that and coming up with your own meaning of that thing based on your own understanding of what is actually going on. And so what I mean by that is like just because somebody says, you should, put your opening brace here and your closing brace, on a new line instead of doing that, right? Like, that's completely subjective, right? Or how you space things out. Like, at the end of the day, this stuff doesn't matter, right? And so, kind of weigh it out. What matters, what doesn't matter. Chances are whenever you, whenever you're going to work for a specific company anyways, they're going to have their own code standards that you have to follow regardless of your own opinion regardless, right? So, that's just kind of how it is, right? And hand codes, rated with a party of 40 viewers. Welcome, raiders, and thank you so much for the raid. I appreciate that. How are you doing tonight? What did you get up to on stream? There is a shout out. I don't believe we have met before, but what did you get up to on stream? Doing some SQL stuff. Nice. Well, welcome. So what we're doing here is we're writing a game engine from scratch using C and Vulkan. So let me just pull up this, and I'll do my quick 2-minute spiel here. So we're writing something called the Kohi game engine, right? And this is a project that uses C and Vulkan as its initial rendering backend. It's open source. It is free. So all the code is available here on GitHub. It is Apache 2.0 license, which basically means that if you use this, you are the only thing that I ask is that you say that you used it, and that's literally it. There will never be any licensing fees or royalties of any kind. It's 100% free, always will be. We're just kind of in the process of building this, completely from scratch, right? So here's a couple of screenshots. We're in the middle of a refactor right now, so I can't exactly show it on screen. Just due to that, we're actually kind of closing the loop on that refactor at the moment. But here's a couple of screenshots of some of the stuff that we've got going. And so it is cross-platform, at least on desktop platforms. So it's available on Windows, Mac, and Linux, with mobile planned in the future. And then we've got, a Discord, GitHub link, all that good stuff here on the main website, and then a link to the stream here. So that's more or less what we're doing. The engine itself is sort of designed in a little bit of a modular fashion, right? Where we have the core library, we have the runtime, which is sort of what the application inherits from. We have a plugin architecture where most of the things outside the absolute core of the engine are actual plugins. So you can mix and match your functionality that you want based on what plugins that you actually configure to be used. So the audio is a plugin, the renderer itself is actually a plugin, and the UI system is a plugin, for example. And then we have what we call our testbed, which is an application, a library of actual game code or application code that's hot reloadable, and then we have the assets for that. And so we're following this sort of modular approach to this, and yeah, that's more or less the quick and dirty intro that I could do, at least for now. So let me get caught up with chat here. I'm going to kind of work from the raiders and go backwards. Let's see. It's all pay to play or pay to win on mobile. Yeah, so that is exactly what I'm wanting to get rid of, right? Skip mobile. So one of the things that I actually have planned is probably not for the first game that we write with this engine, but maybe the second, maybe the third. I haven't really decided which one I'm going to introduce it. But whatever we wind up doing to release a game on mobile, we're going to keep that just like the engine. It's going to be 100% free. It's going to be no ads, no transactions, right? I think that stuff is poisonous, and I'm not a fan of it at all, right? I would much rather, put like a Patreon link, right? And say, hey, if you want to support my work, go here, right? Toss me a couple of bucks, right? But as far as the actual application itself, it's probably going to wind up being free. At least the mobile versions of that, right? You're wild. I have much respect for people writing game engines. I'm ditching Unreal, going full kohi. Awesome. I mean, this engine is not production ready yet, unfortunately. We're going to be there before too much longer, but like what we have right now is a basic framework, right? We don't have an editor yet. We're going to have to build that out. So when I say we're building everything from scratch, I mean we are building everything from scratch. This does not use any external libraries with the exception of one. Let me see. I think this was in the runtime. This uses one header file to load images, one header file to load fonts, and then our audio system just uses one header file for Vorbis and one header file for MP3, right? And that is the only libraries that we actually use. We don't have any external dependencies on anything. And so, yeah, we kind of wanted to keep everything as light and compact as possible. We're doing all of it from scratch. And that includes our UI system, which we're going to build out to build our editor. And then we're actually the plan there is we're going to build a basic UI system and then build a UI editor and then use the UI editor to build the rest of our UI system, right? So it's going to have a snowball effect here at some point soon. Let's see. Looks awesome. I appreciate that. Thank you. How long have I been working on it? So it's been, I think we just crossed 3 years. Now, asterisk with that, right? It's 3 years of part-time development at best, right? So I'm able to put part-time hours into this. I do have a full-time job. This isn't what I'm able to do full-time, unfortunately. And so, I'm able to put in 10, maybe 15 hours a week on this. So it's taken me 3 years, but if you compress all of that, you're really talking probably about 6 months of work, more or less. You're trying to get into web development. That's cool. That's actually what I do for my day job at the moment. I do have a history of working in game studios, but currently I'm doing web development because that's what pays the bills, right? Let's see. A while ago, I remember you talking about handles being better than pointers. I forget what you said as to why that was. Could you talk about that a bit more? It was interesting. Okay. I will come back to that. But yeah, we could talk about that for sure. Because that's a little bit of a deep dive, right? Have you taken a look at Casey's computer enhanced course? Not outside of a cursory look at like the agenda. Namely because I just don't have time, right? I've heard it's good though. Let's see. Is the infinite grid in Kohi actual geometry, or is it a plane with lines rendered using a shader? Yeah, so in our case, it's actually just literal lines drawn using a shader. Yep. Usually you can encode handles with like aversion and validity, so it's safer than blindly dereferencing raw pointers. That is basically the meat and potatoes of it, right? So if we go to this, we could just look at the structure, right? So basically a handle is an index into some sort of a resource table or array, right? And so whenever we have a system, let's use textures, for example, right? My texture system doesn't actually use this yet, but it's the simplest explanation. That's on the to-do list, is actually to convert that. So let's say we have an array of textures, right? We'll say we have, 30 textures loaded or something. Whenever we acquire a reference to that texture, we say, give me a handle to that texture. So each of those textures, right, it exists somewhere in an array. So this is a index into that array. And then we also have this unique ID, which is a 64-bit unique identifier under the hood, right? It's just a 64-bit integer. And so what this does is it goes alongside a entry into that same texture table that also has a matching unique ID. And so what happens is if we release all of the references to that texture and that texture becomes unloaded, then that unique ID in that texture lookup table changes to an invalid ID. So if we then say, hey, texture system, I've got this handle out here. I want to get the handle, or I want to get the texture at index 4, right? We're also passing along with it a unique ID, which basically says this is the version of that is unique, or that is valid, right? And so the texture system would look at that and say, hey, these unique IDs don't match, which means that this handle is stale, and then we can handle that, right? Versus having a null pointer, or worse, a pointer to somewhere else in memory that is completely invalid and has different data in it completely, which would be hard to debug, right? So this is a lot safer than just using roll pointers everywhere. So we didn't have this when we initially stood up the engine, and we're slowly converting everything in the engine to actually use these instead. And the other thing is because it's just a quick lookup into into an array, you're paying about the same cost as you would looking at a pointer anyways, right? So that's more or less what we're talking about. Let's see. Code that functions with good performance is the actual clean code. Based. I agree. Code that looks clean to the observer is different, though people conflate how they feel about the code versus how it works. This is the biggest problem with large teams of developers this way. Like, in general today, is people generally just kind of look at code and they go, that doesn't look clean to me. It doesn't meet my standards of what's clean, so it's crap, right? Even though there might be something in there that's done that is, there's a reason that code is that way. You can't map your translation of the intent of the code over top of its function 100% of the time. Agreed. That's where documentation is and literal programming come in. Yep. They are intended to communicate those things. No need to make computer language your language. They are different. That's okay. Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts on clean code, right? Clean code, I think, it's not as useful as people claim it is, and it's more based on feeling than actually what the code does, right? More or less. Have you talked to the Cherno? He did an engine that showed it all on YouTube. Yeah, so I have talked to him a little bit anyways. So his approach and mine are different, right? So his approach is he's basically using a series of libraries, and he's sort of stitching those things together and building his engine on top of that, which is a valid approach that's used a lot of times by AAA companies, right? That's used in big corporate projects, right? So the difference between what he's doing and what we're doing here is, he's more focused on the final product versus we're kind of focused more on the journey of getting there, right? And what we do here is we do a lot of debugging on stream, which I know he does some of that as well. But we try to also limit what we do off stream with this, which also hampers development sometimes a little bit. But, so it's just different approaches to the same target, right? You walked up into the middle of a huge discussion. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to read all of the chat, I don't think, but that's okay. If you find the topic interesting, Flu from SoCal has written an article going over it. Oh, about handles. Okay. I think I actually know which article that is. I remember the early kohi vids getting me through working from home during COVID times. That's awesome. I appreciate that. Yes, the best way to get in. Yep. I am a C# dev. No need. No IC. Keep my C# and Python to myself. So here's the thing, right? So we're using C on here, and this is something that I kind of disagree with a lot, that streamers tend to do, right? We're using C and Vulkan, right? But I'm not going to sit here and say that this is the only way you should do it, right? I'm not going to say that you shouldn't use any other language and C is the only way to go. And I make jokes about C++ on here, right? But if C++ is what you know, if C# is what you know, stick with that, right? There's nothing wrong with that. If you wanted to learn C later, that's fine, but you don't have to, right? It only really matters if you're doing some huge project, right? If you're trying to ship an indie game, C#'s more than fast enough for that, right? So yeah, I mean, that's my feeling on that, right? If you're a C# dev, that's fine. You know, we've got somebody here that works with Ruby, I think he said. We have ads. And I do see all of the comments over here on the YouTube side. We will catch up to that in just a moment as well. So for those of you who can still hear me, I didn't see the ad timer coming up, but generally we pause the stream whenever ads come up on the Twitch side so that nobody misses anything, right? So that's what we're doing now. All right, we got about 30 seconds left on ads. And then we can continue. Almost done with ads. All right, and ads are dead. All right, so we're back. So I didn't get a chance to say this because the ad timer caught me off guard, but I do like to pause the stream whenever ads come up on the Twitch side, which is once every 30 minutes for up to 90 seconds. That way nobody misses any content, right? So it's a programming stream that kind of sucks if ads come up and you can't hear or see what's being talked about, right? Let's see. Psycode, good to see you. It's been a bit. How are you doing? I hope you're doing well. Handle ID plus gen ID for invalidation. Yeah, that's essentially what we have here. Yep. You can think of this as a generation. Yep. We just randomly generate this number instead of increment it. That's really the only difference. But we could essentially do that if we wanted to as well. A C# dev is just a C dev who hasn't dropped the hash yet. Feels good, man. Fair enough. Okay. Weird Trash Can. Good to see you. It's been a while. How you doing, bud? Welcome back. People looking for alternatives to clean code should take a look at A Philosophy of Software Design. I don't think I've read that one, but I am going to take a note of it. Is this, let's see, The Pragmatic Engineer. Is this The Pragmatic Coder? Because that is a good book as well. Or Pragmatic Programmer, I think it's called. Because that is also a good book. Clean code is your code. And you've redone it many times. Yep, exactly. C# does not exist. It's just Microsoft Java. Yeah, well, I would say C# is what Java should have been. Honestly. Some of Trono's is a bit messy since he's focused on the final product, which, real talk here, right? Especially when you're getting ready to ship a product, messy code always makes it into your code base. It always happens. It's unavoidable, especially when you're in last minute crunch. Guaranteed you are going to have messy code make it in, right? Absolutely, that's going to happen. you try to contain that and avoid it as much as possible, but sometimes it is what it is. We have sections of code in here that are a mess too, right? We've cleaned up a lot of that in this refactor effort, but yeah. Diamond, good to see you. How's it going? It's going to cut in multiple ways. Yep, exactly. Was that a keg of coffee? No, this is a Moscow Mule at the moment. Yeah, it's a brass mug. I do have. Do I have it in here? I guess I don't. I think I left it downstairs. But yeah, I have a. I do have a. I want to say it's a 16 or maybe a 20-ounce coffee mug. It holds like 8 cups of coffee. I do have one of those. Doing great. It's been a while indeed. Good to catch you live once more. Awesome. Yeah, I'm glad to see you here. I'm doing well. Yeah, can't complain for sure. Don't know how much coding I'm getting done tonight, but that's okay. I enjoy talking with you guys. Do you have a forum that I can join and take part in your progress without disturbing, just learning? So we do have a Discord server. Does my... Let me see if my chatbot will actually drop the link or not. It's been a little bit... All right, you know what? I'm going to grab it from... Here, I'll just manually paste it. We do have a Discord server. I'll drop this on both sides. And yeah, you guys can always join the conversation there. There's like 900 people in there, I think, at the moment. Let's see. Okay. You were full of uni assignments? Yeah, I can understand that. Hopefully that's all over for you, Trash Can. Let's see. Today I figured out how to add a custom Vim command that maps to W, or uppercase W to W. Changed my life. No more fat-fingered W causing errors. Yeah, I do that all the time, actually, on stream. Right, like I always do. I do this one a lot, which is really annoying. So I might have to actually edit my config to do that, because it should be, that. Nice mug, thank you, appreciate it. Why did humans make dynamically typed langs like Python and JavaScript, and then add type hints for Python and invent TypeScript for JavaScript? Yeah. Good question. It's all Discord. I remember TeamSpeak. Yes. I also remember Ventrilo before that. Or was TeamSpeak first? I can't remember now. It's been so long. I think Ventrilo was first, right? You still host your TeamSpeak? Nice. Yeah, that's the Vim API and Vim user command. Yep. I'm going to steal that, actually. I'm going to steal that. All right. Ventrilo was first. I thought about that. Yeah, I thought so. Then TeamSpeak got it for self-hosting. Okay. Yeah, I'm aging myself by talking about Ventrilo. I know. I used to use that for WoW raids back in the day. When we were raiding Zul'Gurub, I think it was called. Believe it or not, some people prefer dynamic typing. Allows for faster iteration. Yeah, so like if you're trying to quickly knock out like a utility script, or proof of concept of something, sometimes that stuff can be really quick, right? Those people will hate Zig, yeah. Iteration as in feedback loop. Yep, I get that. Maybe we're the same age. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I'm 38, so. Uh, all right, let me catch up with the YouTube side. Let's see. Can you explain how to approach learning shaders? I'm struggling there. So that's a loaded question. So if you're, hmm. So do you mean like the shader language, or do you mean how like shaders work? So if you're trying to learn how shaders work, you might want to use something like OpenGL or WebGL if you want fast iteration, right? Um, and learn GLSO because that's probably the simplest of the two. Um, that would probably be the way that I would pick it up before you try to actually like understand Vulkan, right? Because Vulkan actually can use GLSL that gets translated into bytecode that it winds up using, right? So if you don't have an understanding of GLSL first, Vulkan might be a little bit challenging for you. So I would say probably start there. How long have you been using Vulkan? I just started learning OpenGL a few days ago. Hope to transition to Vulkan after some time. That's probably the right way to do it. I've been using Vulkan now since I started looking at it in like 2017, maybe 2018. Didn't do anything serious with it until about 2020, I want to say. Early 2020. So I guess you could say 4 to 5 years max. But seriously, for about 3, almost 4 years. Okay. Are you also learning Japanese? I was in the past for when I went to on my trip to Japan. I've kind of taken a long hiatus from it. I need to pick it back up, but I just haven't, frankly, had the time. But yes. Why not use libraries to write things yourself as a challenge? So that's a multifaceted reason for that, actually. So the whole purpose of this stream and my YouTube channel and all that stuff is it's supposed to be an educational resource. Specifically, the educational resource that I wish that I had to follow along when I was learning this stuff, right? Somebody to sort of explain how this stuff works as you're going along. And part of what I wanted to do with that is make it exploratory, right? So we don't just like cram in a library and go, this is the way it works, and here's a couple of API calls, and then bam, you have physics, for example, right? Or audio. But I wanted to really do, somewhat of a deep dive into some of these things and be like, well, this is what's actually happening under the hood. This is what the machine understands and does. And here's a way that you might write one of those things, to kind of go over those concepts. And that's kind of the approach that we're taking for the entire engine. So that keeps us from, glossing over too much, although we certainly do have to gloss over some stuff because this is a huge topic. But yeah, we mostly do that for the educational portion of it where it's relevant. But also, yes, it is a challenge for sure. No questioning that. Is the refactor nearly done? Yes. So we are able to compile. We are actually just working through the errors now. So one of the things that we are wanting to do tonight is to actually rethink about the way that we're handling windowing, because we refactored that with the backend. And I'm thinking I'm probably going to take the easy way out this time with the to-do to refactor it to the more complex way. What's your opinion on Zig? I've been coding in it and I'm loving it. I have not used it enough to give a qualified answer. I know Spiro here on YouTube has been wanting me to use it. The only reason that I'm not using it is because it's in its infancy. And with a project with a scope like this, I can't afford to have language issues pop up or compiler issues pop up as I'm trying to move forward, right? Like if I get blocked on something like that, I'm screwed, right? Yeah, it's not even 1.0, right? So like I do want to try Zig. I want to try Odin as well. Maybe even Jai, right? But I wouldn't set out to make a project this large with any of them yet until they're much more stable. So that's basically where I land on that. Yeah. Zig is our Lord and Savior. Yeah. Yeah, you would say that, Spiro. 8 out of 10 language. Would love it. Would recommend it, but rough. Yeah, I've heard the tooling around it isn't so great. Like the LSP and whatnot isn't very good. Zig will save us all, cure all ailments, remove all wars, create world peace. I mean, isn't that what Rust is claiming to do? Just get good and use no LSP. You know, you say use no LSP, but have you typed out some of these Vulkan structures, my dude? You know, some of the structure types that are in here are absolutely insane. You know, and I have a few of them in here. Right? Like that, for example. Right? You're a man. You know, I don't know. I don't like typing the same thing over and over again, right? I don't like typing out super long things like this, right? Just to type it again over here. That's one of my complaints about the Vulkan API, actually. Was watching a bit of the series on YouTube. Just want to say, absolutely amazing what you're doing from scratch. I appreciate that. Thank you. Did you see the longest ever struct? Wait, did you see the longest struct in Vulkan? It's massive. GigaChat, I'm with Spiro on this. For some reason, my intuition with VK struct and enum names is insane. Yeah, I've actually like this is such madness that I've actually considered writing a macro for it. Not even touch Vulkan. Did some DirectX 9 back in the days. Looking up to awesome. Yeah, the DirectX 9 is mostly what I worked in back in the day too. Yep. Let's see. Ahmed, Asu, and Tic Tac Boom. Thank you for the follow. Appreciate that. Appreciate the follows. Those help out a lot. Let's see. I feel like I missed some chat up here too. Yes, I definitely did. Shader toys for fast iteration. That is a good point. I always forget about shader toy. Yep. If you're looking to work to learn shaders, shader toy is the way to go. I'm not at a point where I'm like having to mess with shaders too much, but this guy is freaking awesome, right? You could just like click into here and just make wild shaders, right? And you can just edit the stuff right in here. So if you're looking to learn shaders, maybe this is probably the way to do it, right? So that's just shadertoy.com to answer that question. That's a really good answer. Thank you for that. I always forget about it. For a portable workstation, would you do a MacBook and emulate Linux or a normal laptop with your flavor of choice? So actually, in my case, it would be the machine that I'm using to stream right now, which would be the MacBook Pro. It's a fantastic machine. The hardware is great. It's fast, and I just use it as is. One of the real benefits to working this way through using Vim and a terminal is I can just SSH into my desktop if I want to, and keep programming. Right. I can't debug that way, but if I'm doing like a lot of coding, I can just do that remotely. And then if I am needing to debug, I just use the Mac for that. So yeah, it's great. It's great as that. It is expensive, yes, but since I have to support the platform anyways, it was a necessary purchase for sure. Okay. Oh, you're 35. You started WoW early. Okay, nice. Got into programming when you were 6. Oh, you got me beat by a year. First was a 486E Compact. Yeah, I had a the first machine I started programming on was I want to say it was MS-DOS 5, or was it? I know it eventually got upgraded to 622, but I can't remember if the programming that I was doing on it was in QBasic. I can't remember if I did that before or after the upgrade. So it might have been 5, it might have been MS-DOS 622. And it was a 386. Monochrome green, baby. Most people these days probably wouldn't have even seen a monochrome screen. You did your first batch file in DOS 4? Well, if we're talking batch files, I was writing those before BASIC. Yeah, so I was writing QBasic programs at 7, but yeah, batch files I was probably writing in about 6. Yeah. 6 years old, by the way, not MS-DOS 6. But yeah, I really started programming at 7. I'm a giant nerd. What can I say? Haven't seen a good S-type macro in C. C++ land, they just constructor all that stuff. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it's probably going to wind up being like, if I macro it, it's probably going to wind up being something that just generates this. Right? Clear the highlight. So it'll probably just be something that, that generates that. I don't know exactly how I would attack it yet, but yeah. Mother had a laptop with a red screen. I've watched LGR now. Nice. The red screen makes me think of the Virtual Boy. If anybody remembers that. Tick Tick Boom. First time chat, welcome. I've been developing an idea using Vulkan with C++. Do you have any pointers to resources which can help understand a move to pure C with Vulkan? So, let's see. I think all of the resources out there for Vulkan are all C++. Like I know Sasha Willems' examples are all C++. The Vulkan tutorial, the VK guide, all that stuff is in C++. I don't know if there is one aside from what I have here, actually. Which is another reason that I did this, right? Because I'm like, well, people have done C++ Vulkan. Even though, Vulkan's API is C-based. Yeah, it's usually C++, yeah. It is open source, yep. Yeah, so if you go to... is it going to drop the link, or is it not going to drop the link? My bot really sucks tonight. Hold on. Let me... If you go here... It works on the YouTube side, but the Twitch side doesn't seem to work. But anyway, if you go here and you scroll down a little bit and click the GitHub link, it's there. Yep. Oh yeah, I suppose it would pop up on Google. I never Google my own stuff, so I never think about that. All right. Love your videos. I liked and subscribed. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. That helps me out a lot. Helps me grow the channel and reach more people. So I really appreciate that. Thank you. Okay. What don't you like about Rust? So I answered this a little bit before, but I'll quickly just touch on it. I don't like my memory being managed for me or being like slapped. Being told, don't do this or this is unsafe. I just, as a C programmer, I'm like, I want control of my memory. I don't want the compiler telling me how to do it, right? I will asterisk that with, I have not used Rust in a large enough project to give it a fair shot either. So while on the surface that irks me a bit, I have not actually given it a fair shot and will do someday. In fact, I actually made a deal with Twitch chat that if my YouTube channel gets over 100,000 subscribers by the end of the year, that not only will I chop my hair off and my beard, but I would also write a Vulkan renderer in Rust. So if you want to see that, subscribe. And I will learn the language as I write it, because I've not used it. Isn't Vulkan written in C99? So Vulkan is just an API, right? It's just a spec. So it's up to the individual GPU vendors to write the driver in whatever they want to write it in. Usually that answer is going to be C++. But the API itself is a C API. There's also C++ API available, but the interface for that is C. At 7, damn, I only literally started programming 8 months ago. No worries, man. I have met people who started programming in their 50s and 60s, and it's never too late to start programming, right? It's never too late to start that. You can make that transition anytime you want, and if you plug along at it, you can be just as good, if not better, than a lot of your competition, right? So it's never too late to start those things, right? All right. Dang, that would be sick. Do you mean about my me learning the language and writing a Vulkan renderer in it? Vulkan and assembly went, oof. You know what? Maybe if my YouTube channel has 1 million subscribers, then I'll do a Vulkan assembly renderer. Right? Maybe that's when I'll do assembly for that. I can only imagine how painful that would be. Vulkan with Phasm might not be completely crazy town. Maybe not. Get this man to 1 million. Yeah, not going to happen. I appreciate the enthusiasm, but yeah. But I will say that, yeah, if I ever hit 1 million subs, I'll write a Vulkan renderer in assembly. And I've never written anything that large in assembly, so that would be an interesting taking on as well. All right. Holding you to it. Do it. I already put, so I put the first part of that deal on a YouTube short that exists on my channel, right? So whenever I get back to making YouTube shorts, I'll find this section and clip it. Unless, well, it's probably too late for anybody to clip it now, but I'll grab this out of the VOD. Don't write checks your body cannot cash. Hey, listen, I mean, if I wind up with 1 million subs, I'll probably have enough time to be able to do that, right? So, can we have Vulkan on C64? I don't see how that would be possible. That'd be like Vulkan in 6502. There's no... There's no device drivers for Vulkan on a device that supports that. All right. Zig does like 80% of what Rust set out to do without all the ARC RC box nonsense. Yeah. Yep, I would agree with that statement. All right. Vulkan in assembly, maximum verbosity. Yes. How can you make your game engine run on a console like PS5 or Xbox? How does it work? Where you need a specific platform API. Glad you asked that, actually, because that is something that I would like to tackle. However, there's a pretty large but that goes with that. Because Xbox and PS5 both have very proprietary platform-specific stuff that you have to do, and you cannot open source that stuff, right? So all of the game engines that are out there that support that stuff, you actually have to, you have to have approval from Sony or Microsoft to be able to develop for that platform, and you would have had to sign NDAs or non-disclosure agreements to actually be able to even access that code. And B, you can't open source that stuff because they will just sue you into the ground, right? So, in the event that we ever do get to the point, and I do actually want to get this running on consoles at some point, but in the event that we ever do that, that part won't be able to be streamed or open sourced, unfortunately. The development for that will have to be closed. And that's not my decision. That's the decision of, Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo. But yeah, that is more or less what would have to happen. It's just a different platform layer. Let's see. Sorry to bother about this again, but can I show something I made? Sure. Go ahead and actually, I don't know if you can drop a link in here, but if you go onto the Discord server and go into the Kohi channel and just drop a link or a screenshot or whatever it is that you want to drop, and oh, it did work. Okay, you made a compiler. Sweet. Let me. Ooh. I like that you called it Pog, by the way. I'm a big fan of that. That's pretty awesome. I like that. Oh, all right. I think Spiro clipped it. Let's see. Let's see. Let me shrink this window down a little bit. And is it? I don't know if you guys are going to be able to actually hear this or not. I don't think so. It would seem that I don't have my audio piped through for my desktop at the moment, so I'm not going to be able to play this, but I can turn it up here. But I will say that, yeah, if I ever hit a million subs, I'll write a Vulkan render in assembly. Oh, yep, it's in there. If I ever hit a billion subs, I'll write a Vulkan render in assembly. Yep. Okay. Thank you for clipping that, sir. All right. Nope, there are no backsies. And here's the thing, right? So, like, if I say I'm going to do something on here, I'm going to do it. I just missed an ad break. I realized that. All right. So, I think we only have like 11 seconds left on ads anyway. So yes, very cool on the compiler, by the way, though. Very, very cool stuff, Diamond. You cannot downcast without explicitly stating what you want to do. Yep. And it will yell at you. See, stuff like that I think is fine, right? Let's see. I did some C for a small handheld watch back in 2000 something. It's blocked by an icon here. Let's see. All I did was to find why it didn't work. It was already a product and made. My boss told me, see if you can find any problems. And I asked him, am I looking for a problem or is there a problem? He said, just look at it. After 1 week of reading the code, I found a cast from 16 to 8. He told me about it 2 months later that was the problem. It's funny how that works. All right. So, with all of that out of the way, do you have a code style specification set of formatting rules you're following? Yes. I do. So I am using, let's see. Where is it in here? I forget exactly where. I forget which rules I actually selected. Oh, you know what? It's not even in here. It is actually in. It is actually in here. Clang format. This is what I was looking for. So it's based on the LLVM style, and then I've just got some custom rules set in here. That's it. So the Clang D does the auto formatting for me via that. Do you have a shortcut to go to your includes at the top and then back to where you were? So what I can do is I can hit GG to go to the top, right, to where the includes were, and then I can hit Control O to go back to where I was before. Taman. Oh, you barely slept last night. Rough, man. All right, well, thanks for showing up. It's good to see you again. Glad you were able to make it. All right. Gigi can then type Control P or Control O. Yeah, Y-O. Well, Control I is like to go forward. Control O is to go backwards. So if I hit Control I, it takes me forwards. Control O is backwards. It's just the way that Vim is bound by default. Yep. Okay. So where was I? We were actually debugging this, and we were trying to decide which way we wanted to go based on this error. So just to recap, because we kind of got away from this. So the issue is when we are trying to take a look at our physical device and get requirements from that. One thing that we need to grab requirements for that is a surface. And in our refactor, our surface hasn't been created yet, so we're segfaulting, right? Because we don't have a current window. We actually can have more than one window now. So we don't have a current window. Thus, we don't have a surface to actually use to gather those requirements, right? And so the three ways around that are either create the window sooner, or we split the Vulkan backend sort of in half, the logic in half, and say, well, everything before creating the actual device, which would be here, right? So everything from here up would be done in one function, and then everything from there down would be done after we create a window. And then we also said that there's a third option where we could just say, well, if we haven't done this stuff by the time we create a window, then we could just do it then. The problem with that third option is if we have things that need to be done, like creating textures and whatnot, we have to be very careful to only do that once we've actually created a window. And so it's like, do we give the application the control over that, or do we always just create all of the windows ahead of time, or at least create the main window ahead of time, and use that. And so I think we're going to wind up having to do a combination of some of those things. So if we go to, looks like it's 3:15, right? So essentially, all of this stuff here, we can do right away. And so we have this Vulkan renderer backend initialize, right? But one thing that we probably should do is we should, at a minimum, split this stuff up. So we can have this be part of what we have considered a boot sequence, right? And so we can split all of this stuff into a boot and then call initialize later on down the stream. And the sort of order of events when we're creating an application with this engine is we have boot, which is sort of the initial sort of startup of like things like our memory system, our very, very low level systems, basic initialization of all those things. And then we have some post-boot items that we do, like loading our application config, things like that. And then we have our initialization phase, which is also powered by application config that does other things like opening windows and stuff like that. And so if we split this up and kind of put the window in between boot and initialize, the window creation there, I think that's going to solve this problem. So the two things that we're going to have to do is we're going to have to take all of this sort of beginning logic here and put it into a new boot function, which we're then going to have to tie to the front end. And then, we'll have to move things around in our engine in terms of how it's actually called. So if we go to our renderer front end, And let's just go down a little bit here. We have renderer system initialize, right? And so this is part of the other issue with this. So this render initialize is also what stands up the memory requirement, or the memory for the render system state, right? Or at least tells us how much this system needs. So the pattern for a lot of our systems to start up kind of follows a little bit of a Vulkan-like pattern, where we actually call initialize twice. We say call it once to get the memory requirement, right? So we pass in a pointer to a U64 so that we can write that memory requirement to that U64. And we do that so that we can then say, okay, well, now we can allocate a block of memory of that size, and then call this function again and pass that to this state parameter, right? And then also the config. And so the first time we call this, state would be 0, right? And so that would automatically trigger this to say, just give me the memory requirement. Don't worry about actually initializing the thing. And then when we pass memory here, then we actually perform the initialization using the config and so on and so forth, right? And that's all well and good. But if we split this up, it's going to break that pattern a little bit, right? And so all of our other systems that we have in place, which is in our runtime systems, right? It's a few. All of these other systems follow this pattern, right? And so the question becomes, do we add in a new sort of boot function separate from initialize, right? Because if we were to add a boot to this, the boot is what we would want to do this, not initialize, right? And then initialize would just already take the already initialized state and the config, right? So that's kind of what we need to figure out what we want to do with that as well. Two-time call pattern is so silly. Yeah, I mean it is, but it isn't, right? So like there are systems where we're not going to know how much memory we need to allocate. And the thing is the allocation needs to happen from the context of the actual engine itself, because that is what ultimately that's handed a big block of memory from the context of the application, right? And so the engine needs to be the one to actually make this allocation, not the system itself, because we don't want to just call malloc and line anywhere in any of our libraries. We want to pull from our core memory block that's owned by our engine. And so the reason that we do this is we say, okay, well, system, how much memory do you require for yourself, right? Now we could have like a separate getter for this, right? And maybe that's a way to do it, right? I borrowed this pattern from Vulkan, and so far it's worked pretty well. Because, for example, the renderer system also takes into account the renderer backend. So we have this renderer front end, which is sort of the renderer API agnostic portion of the renderer. So it's all the things that aren't specific to Vulkan, aren't specific to OpenGL, DirectX, what have you. And then you have the backend, which is where all that specific logic exists, which also needs a certain amount of memory. And so we'll never be able to know from the engine's perspective how much memory we're going to need for that, because we could use different plugins for different application builds, right? And so in our case, we could use DirectX, or we could use Metal, or we could use Vulkan, right? And those are all going to have different memory requirements at the hood. So that is kind of the reason we do it that way, right? Is it the best pattern? Is it the only way of doing it? No. But that's just kind of the way that we do it, right? Let's see. Are we just checking present support or full capabilities? It's mostly, well, it's both, actually. So most of it is because of presentation support. But yeah, we're checking we're pulling full capabilities because we'll need to use that later as well. So let's see. Is your render abstracted? Will be purely a Vulkan application. Okay, I answered that indirectly already. Okay. So yeah, Vulkan is the first renderer backend that we're going to use, but it's not the only one. In UEFI, if you do the two call things, but sometimes the call affects the amount you need, so you have to do it in a loop. I mean, I see where that makes sense. I see you like struct. Yes. This is me forward declaring stuff, right? So I don't want to include the files that actually have the definitions of these things because I try to not do that anywhere that I can, right? So this is me forward declaring it and then using that forward declaration here. And then in the implementation file is where we actually include that. If we only need the surface to find a present queue, there should be a WSI function that lets you do that with a physical device and family index. I usually get full capabilities when creating the swap chain and kind of separate that out, since I also wanted to support headless stuff, which that's another thing that we're going to be doing here as well. So that's another example of a backend is we're going to have a headless backend as well. Don't look at my template functions. Yeah. What's your opinion on C++'s virtual functions and the lost performance that comes with it? There's a reason I don't use them. I mean, truth be told though, like, unless you're using the crap out of it, like, it probably is not going to be the choke point of your app though, right? Who cares about headless? So, there is a valid use case for this. Let's say that you have a server client application, right? Where you've got a server instance of the game running that needs to be aware of physics and needs to be aware of players in the scene and people who are connected and whatnot. But it doesn't need to render anything, right? It just needs, to understand what's going on in the world. It needs that physics simulation, so forth, right? That is where a headless renderer would come into account, right? Because then it could just be run on a server, not even have to have any windowing or any of that other crap, and could just run, right? What about programs on like Unreal that operate almost purely based off of virtual functions? I mean, there's a real reason that Unreal is so heavy, right? Templates don't lose performance at runtime, do they? No, that's a compile time loss, right? But yeah, yes, headless in that sense. Yep, exactly. Yeah, so if we want to use this to run a server for a game, that is the primary use, right? Theoretically, we could also use it to write some integration tests, right, for like input and stuff like that. Still use struct in C#? Yes. Yep. PLC programming is a thing. You have to worry about every byte you use. Yeah, fair enough. Can I ask career questions? Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll answer them to the best of my ability, right? Thinking with a virtual function is that I think it hurts a lot of cache predictability. Yes, I mean, because it's a level of indirection, right? So yeah, that's one of the reasons that OOP is so frowned upon in the game dev world is cache reasons, right? When I did that, it was about 16 kilobytes. Yeah. Nobody's ever going to need 600 any more than what was it? 600K? Forget who said that. Nobody's ever going to need more than 600K RAM. WSI functions I mentioned are like VK get physical device, Win32 presentation support KHR. That's all. Yeah. So I'll show you exactly where that stuff has to be used. If I can spell surface correctly. So here's the query swap chain support, which that could be offloaded. I think that actually does get offloaded until we actually create a window. So that's not relevant. Select physical device. So this is part of it, right? So this is where we're actually going through to try and find a physical device. And this is right where we're running into the issue, right? So we say physical device meets requirements. So we go to this, right? And then in here, look what we're calling, right? So, this is physical device support. And then we have, well, there's two places where that's called. And then we query swap chain support here, which I suppose, again, we could defer that. That's really all it's used for, though. So, like, maybe we could just defer some of this stuff. Because I don't think... I think all the WSI platforms support this style of function. Let me pull that one up specifically. Right, so this is this guy here. We have physical device, Q family index. Provided by that which we already would be loading. So physical device, okay, that makes sense. So I suppose maybe I could maybe try adding that to the platform layer. That might actually get me what I need. Okay. So in this case, let me look over at the Linux platform layer, right? Which is really just this. That's where this kind of stuff lives. So it would probably be the XCB version of that. So let me do a search for that. Ross the Boss, thank you for the follow. Appreciate that. Let's see. Okay. KHR surface. Oh, wait a minute. Is this? No, that's not the right one. Let's see. What the heck would it actually be? Should be physical device. Yeah, like I think it should be this, right? Like physical device XKB presentation support KHR. Womp womp. I wonder if I can use... Because if there's only a Windows version of that, that's obviously not going to work. So this... I wonder if there is a... Let me just start typing it, I suppose. So let me do vk get physical device xkb. Yeah, it doesn't exist in there. Doesn't exist at all. That's oh, xcb. Where did I get xkb in my head from? So yeah, that's it there. Okay, so all we need for that is a Q family index, a connection, and a visual ID. I don't think I have a visual ID anywhere. Let me see what this is. An X11 visual. I don't think I'm storing that anywhere. Platform, Linux. Unless that's what this is. That is it. XCB Visual ID. Well, I'll be dipped. Okay. So that's part of the screen. And I am actually storing it. So I guess what I would need to get is I'd need to get this platform state over to the Vulkan platform state. So I would need to do something like I wouldn't want to tie it to the window, right? Because we don't have that. So let's do a B8 Vulkan platform. Presentation support, I guess. And we want Vulkan context for sure. We could take the VK physical device. And U32 Q family index XCB connection T and XCB XCB visual IDT, which I might just be able to use a U32 for that. We'll see. All right, so let's move this down here. Physical device, Q family index, connection, visual ID. right? And I think this returns what? So why does that not... No, that's definitely not what I wanted to use. Where did I get that from? The Billy Gates quote with basic, Bill Gates. It was Bill Gates. Okay, I couldn't remember. The valid part of this, the valid surface part of this always annoyed me because it forced me to initialize a window in a way I didn't want. Exactly what I'm trying to work around now. Yep. We have ads. All right, so we got about 40 seconds or so left on ads. It was a little late on the timer, so. Look, Mom, I'm actually helping in chat. Yeah, appreciate that. Almost done with ads. All right. We are done with ads. So, all right, but this is also bleating about undefined or undeclared function, and I know that that one works. So, I don't know what it's tripping about. Oh, probably that. There we go. Okay. All right, so that returns a bool 32. Right, so if we take a look at to determine whether a Q family of physical device supports presentation. Right. So if we take this and in here, I don't want visual, I want surface. And I want is device local? That's not what I want. Oh, I'm in the wrong file. I really need to put this all into one file so I don't have to do this anymore. All right, so we're doing, yeah, it's literally just doing supports present. So I can probably actually completely eliminate this dependency. Is what I'm seeing here, because literally all that this is doing, it requires the surface to do this, right? But all we really need to know here's the Q family index, right, which is I, and device, which we already have here, right? So all we really need is these two pieces of information, which we have here, and then the other Vulkan or the other platform specific stuff that goes along with that. So how do I want to So if I do that, I need to have a way to make this essentially not include these last two things. I don't want to expose these types at this level, because the header file for this, obviously I don't want these types to be here, and this will vary per platform, right? So do we have, here we're using the window for that. And what we really need is stored like in here. We do have like a K window platform state that we could use when we're creating a window, but that's not going to help us with, oh wait a minute, Linux handle info. Oh, well this actually has something in there that's no longer there. So we have this struct that's declared in both of these places because it's technically private, right? Which is kind of a little bit weird. But that's essentially the same structure that gets passed back and forth between these two, right? This actually has been wrong too. That's a bug. So this should be XCB window. So this should be window dot platform state. Which means we also need this guy over here. Right, and now we can actually say platform states window. So that was going to be a bug that we definitely would have run into. Pretty sure I fixed that on Windows, but I'm not 100% sure now. So I guess the smart thing to do would probably be to move these two types to like a Linux platform types header file, which I was trying to avoid doing. But maybe that makes the most sense, right? So we need the connection. What else do we need here? We needed we didn't need the display. What was it we needed? I think it was visual. So we do need the screen, because that's part of the screen. Okay. So in the handle info, we'll get XCB screen T. We want a pointer to that. Right, and we'll do the same thing over here. And then we can do the same pattern here. Right? And then here we can do, instead of connection there, we can do handle connection and handle screen root visual. And that eliminates the need for us to have these guys. Right? So it makes our platform function a lot cleaner, using stuff that we already technically had. And then here we could just return. And we'll just cast that to a B8. Not that we really need to, but just to be explicit. So that is essentially what we're going to wind up with. And then we'll have to implement this function for the other two platforms. So I can take this, go to Vulkan platform H, which is this guy, which is a little bit weird that we have to do this, but this is where the platform layer and the Vulkan layer sort of cross. So this is going to have to be struct, and then VK physical device. Is that? Please tell me that's a pointer so I can just forward declare that. I think it is, but yes. Struct physical VK physical device T. Okay. So we can do struct VK physical device. Was that it? Was it like that? Now I can't remember. Oops, wrong button. Underscore capital T. Okay. Got it. So now we can do this up here. Oops. Forward declare that guy. And now we have that, right? Indicates if the given device Q family index combo supports presentation. All right, so Vulkan platform presentation support. So if we go back here, oops, well, device. Right. So we have a couple places where this is called. And now we'll be able to say supports present. Actually, we could just do B8 supports present equals Vulkan platform presentation support. I should probably rename that. All right, so we have context, device, and I. Right? Why do we not have... Do we not have context here? Really? Well, that's kind of weird. Would have thought we would have had that. All right, so I guess we're going to replace this with context. Right, so that replaces that. You can get rid of that. And then we can also do the same thing here. Get rid of that. And let's see. Okay, so the swap chain support is going to be the next thing that we have to figure out, right? This doesn't matter. So this is where we're going to leave off. Right, so we'll defer that. Physical device meets requirements. This up here is going to be remove that. Context. I think that's the only place it's actually used, so this should just take in context and remove that. Okay. So that's a lot less hacky as well. Sweet. All right, so the only other thing that we have to figure out is this bit. And I'm going to leave that, I think, for tomorrow because I have to get up for work in the morning early, and that's kind of important. So what I'm going to do is catch up on chat real quick and answer what questions I can before we close down here. So let's see. Should I put my timeline on my resume? I spent 2 extra years to get my GPA. I think on my resume I should just put graduation date. Yeah, I would say just put graduation date. Should I focus on LeetCode or making projects? Making projects 100%. Unless you're going to be applying for like one of these like huge tech companies like Fang or something like that, then the LeetCode stuff unfortunately is more important for them. But making projects is definitely going to get you further, I think, right? You may still run into situations where you have to do the LeetCode stuff or maybe answer those types of questions, but if you do enough projects, you'll probably know how to handle some of that stuff at least. It's always a bit of a mixed bag in terms of where you want to wind up working, what you should study, right? So I would say when you're applying for a job at a company, do a little bit of research, see if you could figure out what kind of questions they're going to ask ahead of time. Let's see. All right. So should I just start a job applying now? Pretty much and hope I can land something. Not sure if... Oh, you're saying for context, you're not sure if you should put 2018 to 2024. I don't think you need to put that. I don't think it's relevant, honestly. What really matters is when you finished, right? Yeah, Lego Bits advice there is not bad either. So yeah, I would say, as far as that goes, make some projects for sure, get some experience that way, and then, I mean, I would probably start applying for jobs before you graduate, right? So like whenever when you're a couple months out from graduating, start applying then, because it takes a while, right? Tried a little bit of XCB and liked Wayland way better. Yeah, I plan on doing a Wayland layer as well. Just haven't gotten there. And then when they said no, called them on the day after and said I'm looking for work. Oh, okay, yep, I gotcha. Camel case crept up. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it gets me because I have to use that during. I have to use that for work during the day. So yeah, every once in a while I think I've clobbered most of it out of the code base, but there's like the Vulkan stuff gets me. Rip ad break. Yeah, I know. I don't always catch them. I'm usually pretty good, but I missed a couple tonight. All right. The WSI layer is the most painful whenever I write a Vulkan RHL layer. I still have a solution I'm happy with on multiple platforms. Yeah, I think this is probably going to be that solution, right? So I have this specific like Vulkan platform layer that exists, right? And that's what sort of joins the two, and then I have them split out from that. Aside from that, and I just try to keep things as generic as possible at this level, so that there's no stuff that is specific to any one platform at this level. Like, it's okay to have Vulkan stuff at this level, right? This is the Vulkan platform layer, but it's not okay to have Linux or Win32 stuff at this level. Um, let's see. Does Kohi include a generic graphical editor program or plans for one? You mean like a paint program or something? No, it doesn't. But um, it could be used to create one theoretically, uh, especially once we get the UI system in place. We could definitely create one with it. That might be a fun exercise, actually. Um, okay, I'm having to skip over some of the chat. um, let's see. All I will say, C Programmer 7 is LegoBit makes a bunch of good points in what he's telling you. Yep. Okay. Yeah, so the one thing to bear in mind, and Zed Hayes brings this up, is what works for one person may not work for everybody, right? And this is the reason I try to stay fairly generic with my advice, right? Is because what worked for me probably won't work for you, right? The way that I got into dev is probably not the way that you're going to get into dev. I didn't go to university for it, for one thing. I went the QA route, right? So like I started at a company in support actually, and then transitioned to QA, and then from there transitioned into development, and then kept on development the whole time. I also did stuff on the side, like contract work and things of that nature, freelance. Um, but my path is very different than a lot of people's path. So it's there is no silver bullet, unfortunately. Um, oh, you were thinking the kind of scene editors like the big engines have that Unreal, Unity have. Yeah, we are gonna have that eventually. Yeah, we're gonna have a full blown like editor like that. Yes, definitely. Um, I mean, so you're saying should your focus be a numbers game and just keep applying online? You're worried about your bad GPA and extended time at university. Um, Here's the thing, right? Like, I have met people on all sides of this spectrum, right? Um, at a couple of my positions, I've been on the interviewer side, right? And I've interviewed people with doctorates degrees, literally that couldn't code their way out of a paper bag. Um, and I've met coders who were self-taught that were smarter than everybody else there in the room, including myself. So it doesn't always matter quite as much as you think it does. And the further that you get away from graduation in terms of your resume, the less that's going to matter. So, for your first job, it might matter a little bit, but eventually, once you have experience and that starts taking over, it won't matter. Um, yeah, Spiro, I'm honestly in the same boat as you. Like my GPAs were never great either. I was very average at best, for sure. And there were reasons for that, which we can go into at some other point. But yeah, a degree is for passing the automated resume filters. Yeah, that's fair enough. Um, to be honest, I don't even know what my resume or what my GPA was. I don't even know if I have it written down anywhere. Doesn't matter anymore. And like for example, the degree that I have, I didn't go to college for programming. I actually went for game art and design. Right. So I basically have an art degree, but I program full time as my job. So it's not as important as you might think it is. You just have to prove that you can do the thing, basically. If you get good enough, it won't matter. All right. So I think that's where I'm going to wrap it up for tonight. So like I said, I do have to get up early in the morning. So thank you guys very much for being here. I really appreciate all the interactivity tonight. I know we didn't get that far with code, but I had a really good time talking to you guys, and that always makes it worth it for me. So If you haven't already, I would encourage you to follow me either on the Twitch side or on the YouTube side or both. So that you guys can get updates as to when I release new videos and stream next and whatnot. We will be back tomorrow night around the same time. I start usually a little bit before 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we'll be back tomorrow night around that time. And we'll pick up where we left off and hopefully maybe get a little bit more code done. But we'll see. Let me check and see who I can raid. Let's see. Okay. I'm going to raid somebody that I have not raided before. And that is going to be somebody who is saying their first game deving adventures. So let's go ahead and get joined in on that raid. And I'll drop a link over on the YouTube side for you guys as well if you want to check that out. But yeah, anyways, if you guys haven't already, I would encourage you to follow me on both sides if you can. It helps me grow the channel. And if you guys want to see me write a render in Rust or eventually assembly, pump those subscription numbers up, right? I don't think it's going to happen, but if it does, cool. I'm not banking on it. But I will catch you guys tomorrow night. So thanks. All right.